Hello, everyone. I want to talk to you guys about the German military industrial complex and how it is really a precursor to a greater European war. There was a conference that took place yesterday. It was the Handelsblatt Conference, Security and Defense. And present in this conference was, and this shouldn't be to anybody's surprise, the CEO of one of Germany's most major defense companies, Rheinmetall. This is one of Germany's biggest defense corporations. His name is Armin Paperger. And Armin Paperger talked in this conference about how there needs to be a boom in the production of tanks in Germany because of this war in Ukraine. And you can just see it. You can see how the defense companies and their shareholders want this war to continue on, because as long as wars exist, these people make bank. These people make lots of money, tons of money, okay? And that's an understatement. And so it makes sense that the German defense industry would want to capitalize on this war. It makes sense, right? It's perfectly expected. It's perfectly expected and not surprising at all, because one man's suffering, one man's death can be another man's profit. And there is a lot to be made. There's a lot of profit to be made from this war, and that's obvious. And so the German military industrialists, they see this conflict as an opportunity to make bank, to make tons of profit. And so the CEO of Rheinmetall, Armin Paperger, stated in this conference yesterday, quote, "The entire German industry is ready. The resources are there. The people are there. We also have the know-how. What we need now is solidarity with politicians that we have the ability to plan." So basically, he wants to see the collaboration between politicians and the military industry in Germany, which means that the military industrialists, the military industrial complex in Germany, is going to want to see a German government that is militarist, a German government that wants military production and manufacturing for war. The Russians are warning the Germans that German tanks in Ukraine will be considered to be escalation, will be seen as escalation. And there was an article that came out about this today in Reuters. Ambassador Sergei Nechayev said, quote, "This extremely dangerous decision takes the conflict to a new level of confrontation." He added, it would cause, quote, "irreparable damage to the already deplorable state of Russian-German relations." And in the beginning of the article, it says that Russia reacted with fury on Wednesday to Germany's decision to approve the delivery of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, saying Berlin was abandoning its historical responsibility to Russia. So they bring up history. What history are they bringing up here? Come on. It's quite obvious what this is, right? They're bringing up World War II. And so they're saying German tanks in Ukraine, there to be used to kill Russian soldiers. This is basically reminiscent to World War II. German tanks being used to kill Russian soldiers. It's like Panzer tanks being used to kill Soviet soldiers. This is what the Russians are saying. And so we see the signs. We see the signs of a coming greater European war. Well, there's already a war in Europe. Yeah, there's a war in Europe. We know it's only in Ukraine. It's localized in Ukraine. I'm talking about an escalation of the war to the point where it's going to boil over from Ukraine into other parts of Europe, and eventually it's going to be a greater European conflict, and it's going to involve Germany. If you look at all of the major wars of Europe, They all involved Germany. Germany was at the center of them all. 30 Years' War. Where was most of the fighting taking place in the 30 Years' War? It was in Deutschland. It was in Germany. And the 30 Years' War began as a conflict over religion between Protestants and Catholics. And where did the Protestant Reformation begin? It began in Germany. And so that explains why, or that's one of the reasons as to why so much of the fighting in the 30 Years' War was concentrated in Germany, because that's where you had so much of this religious division. World War I, Germany was at the center. World War II, we all know. I don't have to give you guys that detail. It's all quite obvious. Before Hitler took power, who helped him? Who was backing Hitler? Who was backing the ascendancy to power for the National Socialists? It was the industrialists. It was the German and the American industrialists. It was bankers. If you look at the Steinbank, yes, I said it, the Steinbank, which was a major German bank at the time, the Steinbank was backing the Nazis. If you look at, for example, Fritz Thyssen, the big steel magnate, big supporter of Adolf Hitler. If you look at Standard Oil, which was ran by Mr. Rockefeller, they backed the militarization, they backed the reindustrialization of Germany after World War I. If you look at ITT was doing business with both sides, doing business with the American military, doing business with the German military. A lot of the big figures in Wall Street were supporting the reindustrialization of Germany. And the reindustrialization of Germany after World War I, of course, meant the remilitarization of Germany, because when you have big industry, you have also a military-industrial complex in conjunction with a technological industrial complex. Those two go hand in hand, because you cannot have war without technology. It's impossible, and that goes without saying. It's very interesting because after World War I, there was all this talk about reindustrializing Germany. All of these big figureheads in American industry and in finance were completely for it because they wanted to do business in Germany. They didn't give a damn if Hitler was a maniac. They didn't give a damn if the Nazis were maniacs, murderers. They didn't care. And make no mistake about it, they all knew what Hitler was about because it was very obvious. And they didn't care. They did not give a damn. Big German industrialists wanted Hitler to become Chancellor of Germany. The industrialists will lead us to war. The industrialists will lead us to war. And it's quite obvious because they make money out of it. And so you look at the CEO of Rheinmetall, Mr. Papkerger, or whatever his name is, you see him saying, we need to make more tanks, make more weapons. We need to boom the military industry of Germany. What is this but a precursor, but a sign of the rise of Germany's military-industrial complex? And it is being accelerated under the justification that there is a war in Ukraine and we have to fight the big, bad Russians. And they're all so evil, and us Germans are all so good and noble, as if the Germans don't have a very, very dark history of murderous advancement, murderous wars. And it reminds me, so if you look at after World War I, they reindustrialized Germany. The industrialists were completely for it because they wanted to make profit. The Wall Street elites were all for it because they wanted to make profit. Bankers were all for it because they wanted to make profit. Just look at the Steinbank in Germany. And that led to the formation of the Third Reich. After the Second World War, the initial policy of the United States was that Germany was going to be a giant agricultural country, and that the job of the Germans was basically to cultivate the land and provide the world potatoes and cabbage. That was the initial plan after the Second World War. Then there was all this debate in Washington about allowing Germany to reindustrialize itself, and that side, the side that supported the reindustrialization of Germany, won. That's what happened. Obviously, because money was to be made. Profit was to be made. And so Germany reindustrialized itself. And then in the 1980s, there was a lot of talk about Germany remilitarizing itself. And it's very interesting. The Soviet Union warned against this and said, if you allow West Germany, because at this time East Germany was under the Soviet Union, so there was, Germany was West Germany. If you allow West Germany to remilitarize itself, it will pose a threat to its neighbors. The Germans will pose a threat to its neighbors. And there is a CIA document that you can look into. It is called Soviet Views on the European Defense Movement. And this is a CIA document that was published that was created in 1984. So this is a long time ago. And this document actually makes mention of Russia's warning against German remilitarization. And it reads that the Soviets affirmed that permitting West Germany to rearm would, quote, pose a threat to the security not only of its neighbors, but also of distant states. And warned Bonn was the capital of West Germany, warned Bonn that negative consequences would inevitably arise if it produces its own long-range offensive weapons. And if you look at what is being talked about in the think tank circles for European defense, German defense, one of the main topics of discussion is Germany becoming more militarily independent. Germany not relying on the United States so much for security. And as Germany becomes more and more independent, you are going to see talk of German nuclear rearmament becoming more and more mainstream. You're going to be seeing it. Gradually but surely, you're going to be seeing it. And eventually, Germany will have nuclear weapons. It's going to be a nuclear-armed country. And you're going to be seeing a major war in Europe, and the two big players are going to be Germany and Russia. And all the idiots out there who think that history doesn't repeat, all the morons out there who say, oh, I don't need history, it doesn't mean anything. All the ignoramuses, the doofuses out there who think, Germany is just a force for democracy and it's just like America now and everything has changed and who cares about history? That was a long time ago. All those doofuses are going to be seen sucking on their thumbs. A lot of this has to do with prejudice, I believe, because there is this idea, especially amongst Americans, North Americans, Canadians included, that savagery is not something that's going to be seen in Western Europe. It's not going to be something that's seen in Northern Europe. Maybe it'll be seen in the Balkans somewhere, and those people are savages. This is the mentality. But it's not going to be seen in France. It's not going to be seen in Germany. And this type of mentality, and believe me, this mentality exists. It exists. I know this from my own experience because when I first began talking about Germany, I got all of the naysayers coming at me. Oh, no, it's not like that today. Everything is different. There's not going to be this greater European war. Well, that's what they said after World War I. Wasn't World War I supposed to be the war to end all wars? And look how that turned out. Look how that turned out. And here we are believing in the same lies, the same bullshit that our great grandparents believed in. It's going to be the war to end all wars. And if you look at the Russians warning the Germans, hey, German tanks in Ukraine, this is seen by us as if it's like World War II. Germany, you are breaking your historical, you're breaking the historical reality of what your ancestors did in the past. And the Russians are basically saying, we haven't forgotten what your Nazi grandparents and great-grandparents did. Your tanks are in Ukraine killing our soldiers. We're going to be seeing this as if the Nazis are there killing our people. Bottom line. Okay. That's how they're going to see it. That's how they see it. They're going to see it as an escalation. They're already seeing it as an escalation. And I showed you the document here from 1984. I read to you guys the document here, the CIA document from 1984, in which the Russians warned the Americans, if you remilitarize Germany, it's going to be a threat to the rest of Europe. The Soviets made this warning. And that mentality has not left Russia. It's still there. If it had left Russia, the Russians wouldn't be bringing up World War II when talking about German tanks in Ukraine. History does not completely repeat, but it sure as hell does rhyme. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it rhyme. You know, you got all these idiots. Oh, Germany won't come back. That's not true. Blah blah blah. It's like people don't think. They don't see the history. They don't see 30 years war, World War I, World War II. They don't notice a pattern. It's like they're incapable of seeing patterns. I'm not that educated. I'm not the brightest person in the world, but I can see a simple pattern like 30 years war, World War I, World War II. That's a pretty easy pattern to see. Even Donald Trump said it himself, not when he was president, but he said it, I want to say last year. He was in an interview, and he said during the interview, you know, look, the Germans are arming themselves. And some guy said, well, you know, do you think that's bad? And he said, well, look at their history. I don't have to be some think tank verbal masturbator to explain to you guys why this is dangerous. I don't have to sit there and use verbal masturbation all the time. Oh, geopolitical, geostrategic in the confines of the Geostrategic Bilateral Security Commission, there is a very dangerous precedent that could lead to destabilization. I'm going to tell you exactly like it is. These think tankers like to use these vague words and terminologies like destabilization, bilateral joint security agreement. I don't use these words. It's all just verbal masturbation to me. Destabilization. What the hell does that mean? Just talk plainly. You don't need to talk in these vague words. Just speak plainly. Just say, these people are going to kill each other. You know, it's like when they talk about Japan and China, they'll say, oh, yeah, you know, tensions in the northeast part of the Asian continent are, you know, could lead to instability in the region, and tensions between China and Japan could lead to destabilization. What the hell does destabilization mean? What does that mean? Just say, we think the Japanese and the Chinese could kill each other one day. Just say it. It'll make more sense that way. But nobody wants to talk that way because they're afraid of having egg on their face, or they're afraid of looking crazy, or they're afraid of their superiors telling them, oh, you can't say these things. We're going to lose funding, blah, 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 blah. But I'm here to tell you the reality plainly. Just look at history. Look at what's happening now. It doesn't take some professor of sociology to tell you about what's happening and to give you some idea, some type of reasonable prediction as to what is going to occur in the world. What is happening in the world is the American empire is withdrawing itself. And it's very simple to understand. When a major empire withdraws itself, other people vie for power. It's just that simple. And little empires form and wars begin. It's like when Alexander the Great died. When he died, all of his right-hand guys started killing each other. Ptolemies and Seleucids and all these little empires rose up. It's very simple, guys. History's not complicated. Human nature is not complicated. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.